What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So, we're running into a lot of the postseason press conferences, not only from the players, but we actually got a chance to hear from Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh today as well. And there was a lot to take away from it. I think a lot of solid information to take away from, right? Not just BS rhetoric or people just talking to talk to satisfy the media. So there were 10 main takeaways that I was able to come away with. And, I think we still have some stuff that's rolling out. I just listened to Alijah Vera Tucker's, season-ending conference a couple minutes ago. Wasn't too much to that particular one, but it was nice to hear from him since we haven't seen him, since playing the Broncos. So nonetheless, here's our 10 takeaways, my 10 takeaways, I should say, from everything I was able to listen to. And I will say, before we dive into it, one of the things I've liked about Robert Saleh is kind of like a motivator, a guy that tries to keep things in place and in motion throughout the course of an offseason where he's not, physically in touch with guys, on a day in, day out basis like that. We've heard all gas, no brakes, right? We've had the finish motto. If there was going to be one for next year, I think it would need to be execute, right? And this applies in all facets, not only from a coaching standpoint, the game planning, the adjustments, how we're going about our draft plans, right? What are our backup plans to our backup plans? And you see it all over the place, right? We've talked ad nauseum about the million of issues with the New York Jets this season, and how we haven't been able to overcome those. And it was actually nice to hear Joe Douglas touch on a lot of that as well. But let's go ahead and dive into it here. So one of my first takeaways is that this entire franchise from top down, right, excluding Woody Johnson, they're essentially willing to go down with each other. Joe Douglas gave Robert Saleh a pretty loud endorsement today about him being the right man to turn this New York Jets franchise around, right? And that may be a complete 180 from how a lot of us feel, right? I've been one that has recently loved Robert Saleh, but I do think that we need a fresh perspective, if nothing else than because he has little to minimal input on the offensive side from what I've seen, right? Year one, things sounded good. It seemed like he was in tune. He was playing the CEO role, even though we know he obviously wasn't a heavy part of the game planning and trying to build the foundation of an offense. He knew what was going on. He kind of knew some idea of how he wanted to self-correct based on what he was seeing. And that was in the midst of him having a first-time guy in Mike LaFleur with him. So that was nice to see. But ever since, it really, truly has been downhill. We've gotten less and less of well put together thoughts and ideas from him about how we go about correcting things. And it's really defaulted to the media terminology of we just need to be better. We're, self-identifying, we're reflecting, we're working on trying to correct it. But Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, for better or worse, they are tied together. I know why a lot of people want to cut Robert Saleh. They either love or hate Joe Douglas with what he's been able to show so far. And both records are trash, but at least from Joe Douglas's perspective, if you put a different coaching staff in place, you are going to hear different varying records. But for the most part, a lot of people feel like you would be in the playoffs, for example, if you had a Todd Monken, if you had a Brian Johnson, take Arthur Smith, for example. Even a guy like that probably would have been able to get us into the playoffs. So I think that does speak some volumes there. Second takeaway is that Joe Douglas essentially admitted today that he'll be willing to take offers on Zach Wilson, right? And he kind of uses that as his default kind of stance on players in general. But we all know when you feel like you've absolutely nailed and hit on a guy, they're untradeable. If you nail, you would consider Aaron Rodgers a guy like that, although, you generally regard this for draft picks. Guys like Aaron Rodgers, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall, your Garrett Wilsons, your Sauce Gardners, your Quentin Williams, those will be guys that quote unquote are untradeable. And Zach Wilson seems to have slipped out of that frame of mind, right? And, there was even some other varying parts during his press conference where it sounded like the plan would be to essentially move on from the idea of having Zach Wilson on this roster, which means we truly would be hitting a reset once again, which takes me to my third point, in that Joe Douglas talked a lot about learning lessons from everything that failed this year, right? You put a lot of your eggs into one single basket that was Aaron Rodgers, and once that went down, even though we still had resources, keep in mind we were still in a great cap situation. Maybe great's not the best word for it, but we were in a solid cap situation to bring on another contract without, mortgaging the future, doing anything crazy. And we still had some draft resources, as we've seen with, a Joshua Dobbs trade to try to pull off something creative. And we couldn't get anything done, or we failed to do so, right? Lack of initiative is really one of the points here that is absolutely irking and causing the ire of a lot of us on our side. But Joe Douglas is willing to lean into making sure he has a veteran quarterback to back up a guy like Aaron Rodgers. And so between knowing that Zach Wilson will most likely not be on the roster again, and keep in mind, I think Ian Rappaport had put out a recent report that it's very likely Zach Wilson gets traded. You couple that with this veteran quarterback, plan in place for the offseason, and maybe there really was some kind of narrative within the building in that they wanted to do everything possible to appease someone like Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson, at least for the duration of the season. So I don't know, for what it's worth, at least there's some kind of plan in place, right? Something that seems functionally and objectively smart for us to do, which directly solves an issue that we saw last year, right? Who that quarterback will be, I don't know. I'm starting to, taking a look at, free agent quarterbacks coming up this offseason. A lot of them will be tied up already with the teams they're probably on. For the guys that do skate free, potentially, I don't think the list is as robust as we think it's going to be, but we'll leave that for another video. Fourth point. Essentially everybody now has mentioned, between Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, they don't expect wholesale changes to the operations, right? Robert Saleh's kind of already said that the coaching staff is safe in terms of himself, Nathaniel Hackett. He expects Jeff Ulbrich to come back, it sounds like. He was directly asked about guys like Keith Carter, and he's patting a lot of guys on the back. And I don't know if this is more so of the kind of situation with even like Mike LaFleur, right? He didn't really want to throw him under the bus or do anything crazy. I don't recall him necessarily talking these guys up like he has with Nathaniel Hackett and Keith Carter. But even from Joe Douglas's perspective, when it comes to how they're approaching free agency, how they're approaching the draft, they don't really imagine there's going to be a major change in place that's going to fix anything that went wrong with the New York Jets. And on one hand, I kind of understand that and see, right, this is the ultimate, it's kind of the ultimate front office coaching staff regime that, they are going to test this consistency method to death. And Woody Johnson is kind of allowing this to play out. So we'll see, right? Aaron Rodgers in and of itself is he's going to have a superhero-like performance next year for us, not just in terms of us having a great record or reaching the playoffs, but to really put a lot of this sour taste from what happened in 2023 in the back of our minds and really give us a chance with him saying he does plan to play for multiple years, a chance to really kind of see this thing through to the other side. I don't know how we're going to accomplish that if he's not, absolutely playing at, one of his best. So we'll see. Fifth situation, kind of getting back into Aaron Rodgers and the regime here. Aaron Rodgers did have some pretty interesting quotes during his quote-unquote season-ending conference where he mentioned that everybody needs to operate as if they're on the hot seat. And this was one that I couldn't agree with anymore, right? And we've heard Robert Saleh kind of allude to it multiple times with him saying, his job is not to think towards the future per se. He needs to coach in the right here and right now, which is ironic because then, you guys basically sat on your thumbs and didn't do anything the entire year to kind of help your coaching situation out. But I digress. And then with Joe Douglas, even some of his comments from his press conference today, where he was mentioning his record not being good enough, the attention. One of the other things I liked that Joe Douglas kind of piggybacked off of, but that Aaron Rodgers brought to light, was that there's obviously some things that we are doing, processes, thought, group thinking, whatever the case is. There's things that the New York Jets are operating by right now that aren't conducive to winning. And if anybody was going to be able to identify that and help weed that out, it would be Aaron Rodgers, coming from the program that he's helped build for the better part of the last 2 decades. And now he gets to bring that into the New York Jets regime. And hopefully the idea here is that we will see a very different brand of not only football, but of how we are approaching things in the offseason, right? We've joked a lot of times on Jets Flight Squad about winning the offseason and not really being our Super Bowl. And then, we get into the regular season and we can't do anything. So I do like the idea that everybody's kind of understanding that even if Aaron Rodgers wants to play multiple years, we have to get through 2024 successfully in order to have another swing at that. Sixth point here, Robert Saleh did highlight something that honestly has kind of been insane, given the performances and how we've done, right? People love to highlight the records over and over between Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, and that's fine. I'm not here to argue that. But when you think about some of the reasons we've seen Todd Bowles' teams fracture, Adam Gase's teams fracture, Rex Ryan's teams fracture, you can go back to Herm Edwards and plenty of head coaches before them. Things have generally always failed on the offensive side, right? And yet you have a crazy amount of situations, quarterbacks being, punched in the jaw. You have the offense and the defense outright calling out each other in more of a negative light rather than it being objective, constructive criticism. And yet with Robert Saleh, the closest that we've really come to a lot of those, circus type jinx and situations has been this season, in my opinion, where, you start to see guys like CJ Mosley crack ever so slightly and mention like, hey, the defense and special teams is doing their job, and basically saying the loud part as quietly as they can that the offense isn't holding up their end of the bargain. And even though that's not contributing to the record, I will say 100% that needs to be something that's highlighted about Robert Saleh as a leader. Everything outside of the football field, I'm very comfortable with from an intangible standpoint with Robert Saleh. It's the X's and O's in the building. Can he find a way to make sure he's fielding successful offenses and being able to be a leader of men, not just for defense and special teams, but for the offense as well, that I think gets called into question. But he definitely gets, the hat taken off from me in that we aren't the classic circus from being an on-field terrible product and a media terrible product and everything else in between. So kudos to him to that for what it's worth. And then, of course, point 7, we have Garrett Wilson. It's probably going to be one of the more viral clips out there, right? That, some shots were thrown, called this season, or year, the worst of his life. It basically directed, some of the frustrations around play calling, right? The quarterback situation, he's actually handled pretty well this year. Now, obviously, he hasn't had great quarterbacks throwing to him. Outside of Aaron Rodgers, but where we seen him getting frustrated with stuff last year and calling out practice habits from Zach Wilson and stuff, this time around he opted to go with play calling, and it seemed like he felt a lot more that, and this kind of gets into, one of my final points, so we'll just combine these two together, but that there was a lack of adjustments, right? Calling out Nathaniel Hackett, I think, needs to be something that everybody on the offense is doing, even if coaches, behind him, like your Keith Carters and your Todd Downings, are doing bad. You as the OC are overseeing everything as a whole, which is why Robert Saleh is in the hot seat himself and not being able to just skate by based on what he's having his defense still perform like, given the offensive situations. Nathaniel Hackett, from a statistical standpoint, absolutely terrible. Historical standpoint, absolutely terrible. You take a look at some of the new ratings and rankings and stuff that I've chatted about that have him, as well as a bottom 5 play caller relative to what he has in terms of pieces that's still on the field. That's accounting for the bad offensive line. That's accounting for multiple guys getting hurt in terms of his weapons. That's accounting for his quarterback situation. And yet you still have guys like Arthur Smith, who was recently fired, leagues above him, from an efficiency standpoint with how he has his offense being conducted. So it's going to look completely different under Aaron Rodgers, which is it's the theme I'm sticking to in my head. But a lot of my concerns about keeping this coaching staff in play again was the fact that what does life after Aaron Rodgers look like, right? It'll be great to give a quarterback 2 years to sit before we give him the helms and see what we can get done. But I just really don't trust this coaching staff right now. And as I will continue to mention, even if we have tremendous success next year on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of that will be attributed to what Aaron Rodgers was able to do next year. Final 2 points. The defense, they pretty much, in a lot of their season-ending conferences, they've kind of opted to stick to themselves, talk about their own development, what does next season look like for them, different things of that nature, which I think was a best case scenario for us, right? It would have been easy, again, in an emotional atmosphere. You're cleaning out your locker instead of being able to suit up for the playoffs and take out teams. And keep in mind, we beat, 3 of the playoff teams that are currently in the fold in, the AFC and NFC. So it's not like we couldn't have got there and not have made any noise, right? But they opted to kind of focus on themselves, which again maybe is a small nod to Robert Saleh. But I like the fact that we're not completely fracturing as the season ends here as well. And you do feel good that a lot of these core pieces are being retained, right? Again, even if you bring in a Jordan Whitehead, that's fine. I would imagine we still bring in competition by re-signing a guy like Chuck Clark or, draft, etc. Ashton Davis has come on. But outside of Bryce Huff, you still feel really good about what we can accomplish next year there. And then one of the bigger understated storylines for next year will be Alijah Vera Tucker. So getting into, a little bit of the press conference that he has, one of the main takeaways were going to be, what do we do with him, right? Robert Saleh's already identified he wants to keep him at one position, and the kicker for me was regardless of injury as well, right? And I do think that's the way to go. Unless you literally are in an emergency situation where you're touching your third, fourth, fifth player at that position once again, or before you decide you want to have to go to free agency route to help fill some things, unless you could do a small switch. I love the idea. AVT himself mentioned he's not sure what position he wants to play best, right? Keep in mind, he's done left tackle, left guard, right tackle. And I do think it's smart for the team, while he still will be mostly working on rehabilitation, to take their time, go through free agency, go through the draft. Just know in the back of your mind that you have AVT slotted in as a starter at one of those positions, but give yourself the open game plan, right? Joe Tippmann's your center. AVT is going to be locked in at one of those positions. Try to get the best player that you can in free agency, or players, I should say. Same thing with the draft. And then just recognize that, as you cleared up some of those pictures, ideally, here's where ultimately you feel like AVT can be. And so the only issue I can see us running into here is that, AVT mentioned taking some time to self-reflect, look at the tape, see where he feels his best position is, unless he brings that to you at the forefront before you start trying to lock in plans and stuff. Again, keep it open. But yeah, ultimately, again, to recap things, it's going to be a long off season, but I am generally excited for the whole fiasco. Once again, this is where we start to come alive and stuff. But let me know what you guys think about the off season plans. Kind of what were your takeaways from a lot of these season ending conferences. And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.